everyone, and welcome to the Nordic Sound channel. My name is Jameson Foster, the American Skald, and today we are doing our first actual video for the channel here. And I figured we would do something a little bit different. So as we go into the 20th century with music history at this point, if you've been following along on the podcast, we're going to be talking a little bit more about Vikings, or specifically how the Vikings were perceived by composers from Edvard Grieg onwards, because they start becoming a recurring theme in ideas and art surrounding Norwegian nationalism. So, why am I making this video? There are 1,000 videos on YouTube, it seems, about the Viking Age. But sometimes it's a little hard to sift through who knows what they're talking about, who doesn't know what they're talking about. Sometimes it's easy to think just the person with the prettiest thumbnail knows what they're talking about. However, I figured that I would actually give you guys the ability to look at books about the Viking Age that are used in college courses on the Vikings, so you guys can read for yourself, and you can sort through what you read about on the internet with your own knowledge that you would gain from these books, and make the decision for yourself, who's telling you the truth and what's more fantasy than history. So with that said, you might be asking, well, Jameson, what makes you special? Why should I listen to you if there are already 1,000 videos out there about Viking history? Well, I do assistant teach the Nordic Studies courses here at CU Boulder with Avidan Raggio and Dr. Matthias Nordvig, who runs the Nordic Mythology channel. With them, I assistant teach Viking history and Old Norse mythology to about 100 undergrads a semester. And so I now have the inside knowledge on what sort of textbooks, what sort of sources we use, and how to teach this stuff in a way that separates the academic history from the more well-known fantasy. So for that reason, I have decided to now offer my experiences and my insight as an educator in this field to help you guys, help yourselves learn a little bit more about this very popular but just as misunderstood topic. So first up, we have James Graham Campbell's The Viking World. Now, I have the atlas to the Viking World. I sort of married into it. My wife already had it when I married her, so lucky me. However, the standard version of Viking World is sort of like the core book for understanding the Viking Age. It's what we use to teach undergraduates, and you'd be hard-pressed to find a Viking course that doesn't reference this book. It's sort of a one-stop shopping if you want to understand the Viking Age. It covers anything from shipbuilding, exploration, trade, religion, poetry, art, runestones, language. It sort of covers it all. If there's anything you want to know about the Viking Age, I cannot recommend this book enough. It's only $20 on Amazon, and it'll get you started on the path of you understanding the Viking Age, no matter what your interest in the Viking Age is. And with that in mind, we're going to look over at Elsa Rosdahl's The Vikings, where she takes much the same approach, but she does it in a little bit more of a digestible way. Elsa Rosdahl is actually who taught Dr. Matthias Nordvig here at CU Boulder. And he recommended this book to me as well. And I would say that it does some things that the Viking World doesn't. It goes into some more detail, and it's also a lot more recent. So on top of it being more recent, she also makes it more accessible. I like to say that a good book is a book that's easy to pick up but hard to put down. Viking World is a bit hard to pick up, but easier to put down. The pictures in the World Atlas help, but with the Vikings, even with a lack of pictures, it is easier to pick up and harder to put down. It reads a lot better. Elsa Rosdahl is a very talented writer and also very knowledgeable as well. So again, taking the archaeological approach to understanding the Viking Age, she looks at topics ranging from... Oh, she also gives a very impressive set of maps of understanding Scandinavia as well. So a good reference point about locations that are discussed. So if we look at the table of contents, she actually starts with the allure of the Vikings. She talks about why people are so fascinated with them and why people have been fascinated with Vikings, seemingly for the last few hundred years, which is of course a great place to start a book that goes into the more drier academic and dense understanding of the Viking Age. She then goes into how people study the Viking Age, written sources, place names, and archaeological finds. Then about Scandinavia, she talks about the geography, the people, the language, the society, how kingdoms were made, travel, settlements, economy, trades and towns, how weapons and warfare were made, how weapons were made and how warfare was conducted. But then she ends it on my favorite, which it won't surprise you, art and poetry. So she does incorporate a little bit more of the human aspect, while still dedicating a lot more of the book to just the more hardcore understanding from an archaeological and a historical standpoint of what we know about the Viking Age. So, between the Viking World and the Vikings, that is going to give you a really firm academic understanding of the facts that we know. That is very important because the rest of our sources on the Viking Age are written down by people as stories a couple hundred years after there were no more Vikings. So that brings me to the Sagas of the Icelanders. A lot of people don't know this, but a lot of the sagas that we read were not written by Vikings. Sagas that we read were written mostly by Icelandic skalds. This is where I got my name for the channel, or my internet handle, the American Skald. They were poets and storytellers who had a vested interest in both keeping history while also performing it, like telling it as a story. How can I make history a performance? So that's what skalds did, and so skalds wrote down and performed these sagas. Now, because it's written by people who have biases and they have reasons to embellish certain parts of stories, make certain characters seem better, certain characters seem worse, and also that sort of rose-tinted nostalgic look at Viking history, which was at this point like 200 years ago at the shortest. A lot of it is up for interpretation. But however, this is still the human element. These are stories about people written by people. And as a result, a lot of these stories have a lot of really useful information in them about how people thought, place names, how events occurred from the perspective of the people who were actually a part of the events. And luckily, when you use the Vikings and Viking World as a foundation, you can go through these stories and for yourself pick through, well, I don't think that actually happened. That's probably some sort of like dramatic embellishment of what happened. However, you can then also go through it and say, oh, with my historical understanding of the Viking Age, this part of the story seems plausible. And so now with this archaeological and more historical context, you can filter through all of the information presented to you in these sagas and choose for yourself what's history, what's fantasy, what's a little bit of both. Often it is a little bit of both. So, this is, again, Sagas of the Icelanders, and I would highly recommend it because it's just a collection of all of the primary ones. You know, you got Egil's Saga, you got Njal's Saga, and you have another interesting one, which is the story, the Saga of Vinland, it explains how Vikings discovered North America and their encounters with the native peoples of North America. So there are a lot of very fascinating, entertaining, and important stories in these sagas that are crucial to our understanding today of the Viking Age. So, going off of the stories, we also have something called the Havamal. The Havamal is essentially a collection of proverbs in the context of Odin speaking them. So, while this now goes into the realm of mythology, a lot of these are proverbs, okay? It tells you a lot about how the Vikings thought, how they acted, or how Viking Age Scandinavians thought and acted, you know, what were their morals, what were their principles. And again, just like the sagas, it can contain a lot of embellishments. There are going to be a whole bunch of fantasy, okay? However, again, using the understanding from the Vikings and Viking World, you can go through this and learn both how Viking Age peoples thought in Scandinavia, what were their guiding morals, what seemed to be underlying ideologies, what were values that were important to Viking Age Scandinavians. And at the same time, it's a pretty interesting read. And this specific version is by Hugin and Mugen Publishing, which are Odin's two ravens. And it is the Study Havamal. And the reason I recommend this one is because it gives you 3 different translations. Because something important to keep in mind is these sagas, the religious poetry, and the Havamal are all translated. And when someone translates something, their own subjectivity and biases go into play at what words to choose, what words mean what words should I put here. So she gives us 3 English translations. And so we can sort of like compare and contrast which one do we like better. And it also gives you a blank page next to every single stanza where you can write your own interpretations, your own thoughts about the stuff that you are reading. But some of you might, after seeing this, now be thinking, but Jameson, that's not history. You're right, it's not history in the archaeological sense, but it does give a bit of insight into how people thought, which my main criticism of the Vikings and Viking World is that it misses that human element, which, I might be biased because I'm a musicologist and I work very closely with like anthropology and stuff. The human experience is very important to understanding history. And so because of that, the Havamal is really important to understanding how people from the Viking, how people in Viking Age Scandinavia thought, right? What were their principles? What were their morals? What were their ethics? Stuff like that. So Havamal, the study Havamal, highly recommended. Now, lastly, we have the Poetic Edda, translated by Carolyn Larrington. Now, Carolyn Larrington's translation, this is the one that we teach to students here at CU Boulder. This is one of the only textbooks that they have to buy for the Norse mythology course. Carolyn Larrington offers an incredible translation that does not cut corners, and it's in the Poetic Edda where we learn more about the creation of the world, or how the Viking Age Norse believed in the creation of the world, the apocalypse, and this is also where you learn about stories that we now know today about Odin, Thor, Loki, all our favorite lovable Norse god misfits. So, between these 5 books, what do you get? With the Viking World and the Vikings, you get the hardcore archaeological history of the Viking Age. The facts, dates, the where, when, and the hows. With the Sagas of Icelanders, you get an in-between, between history and the human aspect of understanding the Viking Age Norse. With the Havamal and the Poetic Edda, you get pretty much just the humanities, okay? And again, it's just as important as the archaeology. If you want to have a holistic view of any time period, you have to look at the archaeology and the humanity in it too. And that's what's going to give you a better understanding of the Viking Age. Now, as a thank you and a reward for making it to the end of the video, bonus 6th book, a handbook to Eddic poetry. This is edited by, again, Carolyn Larrington, who did this translation, but it's also edited by Judy Quinn and Brittany Shorn. The Poetic Edda can be and is difficult to read. It's a very old poem, over 1,000 years old, and even though translators put a lot of legwork into making them easier to read, there's only so much they can do. There's a lot of esoteric knowledge, weird wordings. There are things that had meaning to the Iron Age Norse that now we do not have any idea what these words meant today. So translators sort of have to fill in the gaps. And that's why these stories can sometimes be pretty difficult to follow. This is a great tool if you want to get the most out of reading the Poetic Edda. This book gives you a whole bunch of tools of better understanding Eddic poetry, ranging from how these poems were transmitted, the traditions of Eddic scholarship, so you can understand the history of the study of the Poetic Edda. There's also talk of how they're dated, their place in mythology, their place in pre-Christian Scandinavia, how the Eddic poetry relates to place names, but of course my favorite chapter is chapter 5 by Terry Gunnell, Eddic Performance and Eddic Audiences. These poems were performed, and that is an important thing to remember about poetry. People did not write this down at the time and then gather around a fireplace and read them together. There wasn't a book club. There wasn't a reading club. Instead, these poems were performed by skalds, and that is how skalds play an important role in the transmission and the preservation and the history of Eddic poetry. So, the Handbook of Eddic Poetry, along with the Poetic Edda, will help you better understand the Poetic Edda, because again, even as someone who teaches this stuff, it can be pretty difficult to follow. And so friends, thank you for watching the first official video on the Nordic Sound channel. I feel like these add a whole new layer of understanding when we are going through Nordic music history, and hopefully you're getting something out of it. If you have other books, because these are by no means the only books for understanding the Viking Age. If you have any books related to understanding the Viking Age that you would like to recommend, please put them down in the comments. I would love to hear it, and maybe I'll even review those books in the future, because I am currently working on some book reviews to give you guys for better understanding music history as well. And so again, thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, subscribe, leave a comment. Anything you can do to help grow the channel and show people that this is a place that's worth coming to, I deeply appreciate it. And so friends, I'm Jameson Foster, the American Skald, and thanks for stopping by the Nordic Sound channel.